The Gobi Desert held many secrets, but none like this. Park Dae-sung stood at the edge of the excavation pit and looked down at something that should not exist. The object was massive, perhaps 200 meters long, and it was shaped like nothing humans had ever built. It curved in ways that seemed wrong, like someone had taken the idea of a ship and bent it through a dream. The metal, if it was metal, shifted colors under the harsh work lights. One moment it looked silver, the next moment it looked like oil on water. He had been working at the research station for 3 months now. The international team had found the object buried under 60 meters of sand and ancient rock. Carbon dating on the soil above it suggested the thing had been there for at least 12,000 years. Dae-sung was not supposed to be impressed. He was a systems engineer, brought in to study how the object worked, not to wonder at its existence. But every time he looked at it, his breath caught in his throat. Kim Yuna climbed up the metal stairs to stand beside him. She was the station lead, an astrophysicist from Seoul who had spent 15 years searching for signs of life beyond Earth. Now that life had found them instead, she looked tired rather than excited. "The Americans want to move it," she said. "They think it would be safer in Nevada." "It has been safe here for 12,000 years, Dae-sung replied. "I do not think Nevada will improve that." Yuna smiled, but the expression did not reach her eyes. "The committee meets tomorrow. Every government wants a piece of it. The Russians think it might be a weapon. The Chinese think it might be a power source. Everyone has a theory. What do you think it is?" She was quiet for a long moment. Below them, technicians in white suits moved carefully around the object, taking readings with instruments that beeped and hummed. "I think it is a ship," she finally said. "I think someone parked it here and walked away. The question is why?" Dae-sung had been asking himself the same question. The object had no visible doors, no windows, no obvious way in or out. But 3 weeks ago, a section of the hull had simply opened when one of the French engineers touched it. Inside, they found corridors and chambers and something that looked very much like a control room. The symbols on the walls meant nothing to anyone, though a xenolinguist named Lee Tae-ho had been working on them day and night. The technology inside was beyond anything Dae-sung had ever seen. It was also completely dead. No lights, no power, no response to any input. The ship, if it was a ship, was sleeping. That was supposed to be Dae-sung's job. Wake it up. He had spent his career taking apart old machines and figuring out how they worked. Soviet submarines, abandoned satellites, prototype aircraft that had crashed in remote places. He had a gift for seeing patterns that others missed, for understanding how pieces fit together, even when the manual was missing or written in a language he did not speak. His colleagues called him stubborn. His ex-wife had called him obsessed. Both descriptions were accurate. The alien ship was the greatest puzzle he had ever encountered, and it was driving him mad. He worked 18-hour days, crawling through the corridors with sensors and notebooks, mapping every system he could find. The power network reminded him of something, though he could not say what. It had layers, redundancies built on top of redundancies, like someone who did not trust a single point of failure. He had seen similar thinking in old Soviet engineering, where paranoia created its own kind of beauty. Dr. Cho Minji, the quantum physicist, thought the ship ran on principles that human science had not yet discovered. "It is like showing a smartphone to someone from the Stone Age," she told him one evening. "They might figure out that it lights up, but they would never understand the internet." "Then we are all cave people now," Dae-sung replied. But he did not believe that. Technology followed rules. Even alien technology. Power had to flow from somewhere to somewhere else. Signals needed pathways. Systems needed sequences. Somewhere in that ship was a pattern he could recognize. A key that would unlock everything else. He found it on a Tuesday night, 3 months after his arrival. Everyone else had gone to bed. Dae-sung sat alone in the control room, surrounded by equipment that hummed softly in the darkness. He had been staring at the same panel for 6 hours, trying to understand a series of symbols that repeated in different configurations throughout the ship. They were not words, Tae-ho had confirmed. They were something else. Numbers, maybe, or instructions. Dae-sung traced the symbols with his finger, feeling the slight indentations in the surface. The panel was warm, which was strange. Nothing else on the ship gave off heat. He pressed gently, and something clicked. A single light appeared. Small, blue, barely visible. But it was the first sign of life the ship had shown since they found it. His heart began to pound. He pressed another symbol, following the pattern he had memorized. Another click. Another light. The warmth under his fingers spread outward. Like blood returning to frozen limbs. He should stop. He should call Yuna, wake the others, document everything properly. This was not how science was supposed to work. There were protocols, safety measures, international agreements about who could do what and when. But the ship was waking up, and Dae-sung could not look away. He pressed the final symbol in the sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire control room lit up with colors he had no names for, and a sound filled the air like a choir singing in a language older than humanity. Dae-sung felt the floor vibrate beneath his feet. He felt something vast and ancient turning its attention toward him. The ship did not start. Instead, it did something far worse. A pulse of light expanded outward from the hull, passing through metal and stone and sand as if they were not there. It moved faster than anything should move. Faster than thought, faster than light. Dae-sung watched it go and felt his stomach drop. He had not started the ship. He had triggered something else entirely. Above the Gobi Desert, unseen by human eyes, the stars began to change. The pulse passed through Park Dae-sung like a wave of warm water. It did not hurt. It did not even feel strange. For a moment, he wondered if he had imagined the whole thing. Then the alarm started. Every piece of equipment in the control room began screaming at once. Red lights flashed on panels that had been dead for 12,000 years. The ship shuddered, not like an engine starting, but like an animal waking from a long sleep. Dae-sung grabbed the edge of a console to steady himself as the floor tilted beneath his feet. Kim Yuna burst through the door 30 seconds later, her hair wild and her eyes wide. "What did you do?" "I do not know," he admitted. "I followed the sequence. I thought it would." "The sky," she interrupted. "Come outside, now." They ran through the corridors, past confused technicians and shouting soldiers, out into the cold desert night. Dae-sung looked up and felt his heart stop. The stars were gone, not hidden by clouds, not dimmed by light pollution. Simply gone. The sky above them was black and empty, like a canvas that had been wiped clean. Only the moon remained, hanging in the darkness like a pale and lonely eye. "What happened?" someone whispered. No one had an answer. The sun rose 4 hours later, but it was not their sun. This star was larger and redder, and it shared the sky with two smaller companions, one yellow and one blue. The light that fell on the Gobi Desert was orange and strange, casting shadows in directions that felt wrong. Dae-sung stood in that alien light and understood what he had done. The ship had not been a vessel for traveling between places. It had been a device for traveling between universes. And he had activated it. Earth was no longer in its own reality. The next few days were chaos. Communication satellites still worked, which meant the internet still worked. Which meant 8 billion people learned simultaneously that their planet had been ripped from its home and dropped somewhere else. Panic spread faster than any virus. Governments declared emergencies. Riots broke out in a dozen cities. Religious leaders proclaimed the end times. Scientists argued about what had happened and how to fix it. Dae-sung was arrested on the second day. They put him in a small room with concrete walls and a steel door. Military officers asked him questions he could not answer. Politicians shouted at him through video screens. Everyone wanted someone to blame. And he was the obvious choice. "I did not know," he said, again and again. "I was trying to understand how it worked. I did not know what would happen." No one believed him. He was not sure he believed himself. Yuna came to visit him on the 4th day. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and coffee stains on her shirt. "We have been studying the ship," she said. "Taeho found something in the symbols. He thinks the ship was never meant to fly anywhere. He thinks it was always a transport device, designed to move entire planets. Why would anyone build such a thing? That is the interesting question. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. The symbols include coordinates, destinations, and one of them matches our current location exactly. Dae-sung, someone programmed that ship to bring Earth here. You did not make a mistake. You triggered something that was always supposed to happen. He did not know whether to feel relieved or terrified. But why? Why would someone hide Earth in another universe and then arrange for it to come back? Before she could answer, the alarm started again. This time, they were not coming from the ship. They were coming from every military installation on the planet. Every radar station, every telescope pointed at the sky. Something was approaching Earth, something very large. The fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system like ghosts materializing from nothing. There were hundreds of ships, each one larger than any aircraft carrier ever built. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the three suns. They did not look like the buried ship in the Gobi Desert. They looked newer, sharper, more aggressive. The first message arrived 6 hours later, broadcast on every frequency at once. It was not in any human language, but the buried ship translated it automatically, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The sleepers have awakened, the message said. Prepare for integration. Dae-sung listened to those words from his cell and felt something cold settle in his chest. He had brought Earth to this place. He had announced humanity's presence to whatever civilization lived here. And now, that civilization was coming to claim them. The days that followed were filled with frantic preparation. World governments forgot their differences and united against the common threat. Armies mobilized, nuclear weapons were readied, scientists worked around the clock to understand the alien technology, hoping to find something, anything, that could help. Yuna and Taeho worked on translations. The fleet continued to send messages. And slowly, a picture began to emerge. The aliens called themselves the Directorate, and they had been waiting for Earth for a very long time. 12,000 years ago, according to their records, Earth had vanished from this universe. The Directorate had searched for centuries before concluding that the planet was lost forever. Now it had returned, and they had come to welcome the survivors. They think we are refugees, Yuna explained to the Emergency Council. They think we have been hiding in some primitive pocket dimension, waiting to be rescued. They expect to find a few thousand scared survivors. They do not know about our cities, our technology, our 8 billion people. Will that change how they treat us? Someone asked. I do not know. But their messages keep using the word integration. They want to absorb us into their civilization. They do not seem to consider the possibility that we might refuse. Dae-sung was released from custody the next day. Not because anyone had forgiven him, but because they needed him. He was the only person who had successfully activated the buried ship. If humanity was going to survive what came next, they needed to understand that technology. He returned to the Gobi Desert under armed guard, surrounded by scientists and soldiers who watched his every move. The ship was still glowing, still humming with power that it had not shown before. Something had changed when he triggered the transport. The ship was awake now, truly awake, and it seemed to be waiting. Dae-sung placed his hand on the warm metal and closed his eyes. He had made a terrible mistake, but he could not undo it. All he could do was try to understand what came next. In the sky above, the alien fleet grew closer, and somewhere in the ship's ancient memory, secrets waited to be found. The United Nations had never met like this before. Every nation on Earth sent representatives. They gathered in a vast underground chamber that had been built in 3 days, deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Protected by layers of rock and steel and hope, screens covered every wall, showing feeds from satellites and telescopes, tracking the alien fleet as it moved slowly toward Earth. Ambassador Shin Hana stood at the central podium, her hands steady even though her heart was racing. She had been chosen to speak for humanity, not because Korea was the most powerful nation, but because Park Dae-sung was Korean, and the world needed someone who understood what had happened. She was a diplomat who had spent 20 years building bridges between hostile nations. Now she had to build a bridge between species. "We have received their terms," she said, her voice calm and clear. "The Directorate offers protection. They offer technology. They offer membership in their federation. All we must do is submit to their authority and allow them to govern our integration into their society." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. On the screens, the alien ships gleamed like knives. "They do not see us as equals," Hana continued. "Their messages speak of us as lost children, as refugees who need guidance. They expect gratitude. They expect obedience. They do not expect us to have our own civilization, our own governments, our own dreams." The Russian ambassador raised his hand. "What happens if we refuse?" "They have not said. But their fleet is large enough to destroy every city on Earth. We must assume they are prepared to use force if necessary." "Then we have no choice," the American delegate said. "We cannot fight them. We do not have the technology. We have nuclear weapons," someone else pointed out, "which might scratch their paint." Hana shook her head. "Military resistance is not the answer. But neither is surrender. We need a third option." She pressed a button, and the screens changed. They now showed the buried ship in the Gobi Desert, glowing softly in the strange light of the three suns. "This ship brought us here. It was designed for that purpose, programmed thousands of years ago. Someone wanted Earth to return to this universe at this exact moment. The question is, why?" The chamber fell silent. "I believe the answer lies in that ship. And I believe the only person who can find it is Park Dae-sung." In the Gobi Desert, Dae-sung was already searching. He moved through the ship's corridors like a man possessed, driven by guilt and desperation. Yuna walked beside him, along with Tae-ho and a team of translators who were still struggling to decode the ancient symbols. The ship was more active now than it had ever been, with lights flickering in patterns that seemed almost like communication. "The Directorate ships are 3 days away," Yuna said. "Their commander has requested a face-to-face meeting with our leaders. They want to begin the integration process immediately." "Integration." Dae-sung spoke the word like a curse. "They make it sound so simple. Like we are just pieces to be fitted into their machine." "They have done this before," Tae-ho added. "Their messages reference dozens of species that have been integrated over the centuries. They see it as a kindness, bringing order to chaos." "And what happens to species that refuse?" No one answered. Dae-sung stopped in front of a panel he had not noticed before. It was hidden in a corner of the control room, covered with symbols that looked different from the others. Older, somehow, more complex. "What is this?" he asked. Tae-ho studied the symbols, his brow furrowed. "I am not sure. The grammar is different. This might be a record, a history." He traced one symbol with his finger. "This mark appears in their earliest messages. It means origin or beginning. And this one." He paused, his eyes widening. "This one means human." Dae-sung felt his blood run cold. "Human? Are you certain?" "The symbol is very specific. It refers to our species, our biological classification." Tae-ho looked at him with something like fear in his eyes. "Dae-sung, this ship was not just programmed to transport Earth. It was built by humans. Or for humans. This section might contain records of who we were before we were hidden." The first meeting with the Directorate happened 2 days later. Ambassador Hana stood on a platform that had been constructed in the desert, a few hundred meters from the buried ship. Across from her, a shuttle descended from the lead alien vessel, its engines making no sound as it touched the sand. The Directorate commander was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. His name, translated roughly, was Vesoran, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. "You are smaller than we expected," he said through a translation device. His voice was pleasant, almost musical. "The records said your kind was fierce, dangerous. But I see only frightened creatures, clinging to a single world." Hana did not flinch. "We are more than we appear. All species say that. Then they submit, and they find peace in service. Ves Oren gestured toward the sky, where the rest of his fleet waited. The Directorate has protected this region of space for 10,000 years. We brought order where there was chaos. We brought safety where there was war. Your world will benefit from our guidance. And if we decline your guidance? The commander's expression did not change, but something shifted in his mirrored eyes. That would be unfortunate. The galaxy is dangerous, and small species do not survive alone. But we are patient. We will give you time to understand your position. How generous. We are always generous to those who cooperate. He paused, studying her face. You are not afraid of me. That is unexpected. I have represented my nation in rooms full of people who wanted to destroy each other, Hana replied. Fear is a luxury I cannot afford. For the first time, Ves Oren seemed uncertain. He had expected gratitude, perhaps even worship. He had not expected calm defiance from a species that should have been begging for help. The integration will proceed, he said finally. Your leaders will be informed of the schedule. Resistance is not recommended. He turned and walked back to his shuttle. But before he boarded, he looked back at Hana one more time. Your buried ship, he said. Our historians recognize its design. It is very old, from a time before the Directorate existed. We do not know who built it or why, but we have seen similar ships before, on worlds that no longer exist. Be careful, Ambassador. Some secrets are better left buried. The shuttle rose into the orange sky and vanished. Hana watched it go, then turned toward the ship in the desert. Dae-sung was in there somewhere, digging through 12,000 years of forgotten history. She hoped he would find something worth fighting for, because in 3 days, the Directorate would return, and humanity would need more than courage to survive. The memory core was hidden in the deepest part of the ship, behind walls that opened only when Dae-sung touched them. It was as if the ship recognized him, welcomed him, had been waiting 12,000 years for someone like him to return. The chamber was small, barely large enough for 3 people. Dae-sung stood in the center with Yuna and Tae-ho at his sides, staring at a pillar of soft blue light that rose from the floor to the ceiling. Symbols floated inside the light, dancing and rearranging themselves like living things. It is a database, Tae-ho whispered. A record of everything. History, science, star charts, and something else. Something personal. He reached toward the light, and the symbols responded. They formed into shapes, then images, then moving pictures that played across the walls like a film from another age. The images showed humans. Not modern humans with their cars and computers and cities of glass. Ancient humans, standing in ships like this one, walking through corridors of light. They wore clothes that shimmered like water, and their eyes held knowledge that had been lost for millennia. They built things that modern science could not explain. They traveled between stars, as easily as Dae-sung traveled between cities. This is impossible, Yuna said. Human civilization is only a few thousand years old. We were living in caves when this ship was buried. No, Tae-ho's voice was shaking. We were not living in caves. We were made to think we lived in caves. Look, the images changed. They showed a war, vast and terrible, with fleets of ships burning against the darkness of space, world after world falling to an enemy that the records called the Void Swarm, a force that consumed everything it touched. The humans in the images fought bravely, but they were losing. System by system, their empire collapsed. Then the images showed something else. A council of human leaders, gathered in a chamber much like this one. They were arguing, debating, some of them weeping. The decision they faced was impossible, but they made it anyway. They chose to run, not just to flee to another part of the galaxy, to flee to another universe entirely, to take their homeworld, their people, their entire species, and hide them in a place where the Void Swarm could never follow. But there was a cost. The technology required to transport an entire planet would burn out after a single use. There would be no going back, and to prevent the enemy from tracking them, they would have to erase everything. Their technology, their history, Their memories. Humanity would start over from nothing. The final image showed a woman standing before the buried ship, her face lined with grief and determination. She spoke directly to the recording, her words appearing as symbols that Tejo translated in a trembling voice. "We are not abandoning our children, we are saving them. One day, when the void swarm is gone, the ships will wake. Our descendants will return to their true home. They will not remember us, but we will remember them. We will be waiting in the stars they left behind." The image faded. The chamber fell silent. Dae-sung felt tears on his cheeks. Though he did not remember crying, everything he knew about human history was a lie. They had not climbed slowly from caves to cities. They had fallen from the stars, their memories wiped clean, their legacy buried beneath the sand. "The Directorate," Yuna said suddenly. "They called us the Sleepers. They said species had been integrated into their federation for 10,000 years. But if humanity built this ship 12,000 years ago, then we came first," Tejo finished. "The Directorate did not create their civilization. They inherited it. From us." The implications were staggering. The technology that the Directorate used, the ships they flew, the systems that governed their federation, all of it was based on human designs. When humanity fled to another universe, they left behind everything they had built. Other species found those remnants and used them to create their own empires. The Directorate was not humanity's superior. They were humanity's students. News of the discovery reached Commander Vesoran within hours. His reaction was immediate and violent. "This is a lie," he declared in a transmission to the Directorate Council. "Human propaganda designed to undermine our authority. The Sleepers are a primitive species, barely capable of space travel. They cannot be the builders." But the Council was not convinced. Scholars had always wondered about the origins of Directorate technology. The oldest records spoke of gifts from a vanished species, knowledge that appeared as if by magic in the early days of Federation history. If the humans were telling the truth, those gifts had not been charity. They had been inheritance. If they reclaimed their heritage, one council member said, they could challenge everything we have built. They might demand leadership. They might demand reparations. They might demand nothing, another replied. But can we take that risk? Vesoran made his decision quickly. He was a practical leader, and practical leaders eliminated threats before they could grow. He ordered a faction of his fleet to prepare for immediate action, not conquest. He told them, quarantine. The humans would be isolated on their world, cut off from the rest of the galaxy, until the council decided what to do with them. But not everyone in the fleet agreed. A young officer named Su Ran, serving aboard one of the support vessels, had listened to the human transmissions with growing unease. She was Directorate-born, raised on stories of the Federation's greatness, but she had also studied the old records. She knew that the earliest texts spoke of the builders with reverence, describing them as kind and wise, teachers who shared their knowledge freely. The humans did not seem like conquerors. They seemed like lost children who had finally found their way home. Suran sent a secret message to Ambassador Hana. "The commander is preparing to act. You have less than 12 hours before the quarantine begins. Whatever you are planning, do it now." Hana read the message and closed her eyes. Then she contacted Dae-sung in the buried ship. "We know the truth," she said. "But truth is not enough. We need proof. We need something that will make the Directorate stop and listen." Dae-sung looked at the memory core, still glowing softly in the darkness. The ship had shown him the past. Perhaps it could show him something else as well. "I have an idea," he said, "but it might wake up more than just memories." "At this point," Hana replied, "I will take any advantage we can get." Dae-sung turned back to the light and began to search for weapons that humanity had buried along with their history. He hoped he would find something better. The Directorate blockade formed around Earth like a noose tightening around a throat. 40 warships took position in orbit. Their weapons pointed at cities they could destroy in seconds. Smaller vessels spread throughout the solar system, cutting off every possible escape route. Commander Vesoran watched from his flagship, satisfied that the quarantine was complete. "The humans will resist," his second officer warned. "They have nuclear weapons. They might use them." "Let them try," Vesoran replied. Their weapons will not scratch our shields. In a few days, they will understand their position. Then we can begin proper integration. He was wrong about many things, but he was especially wrong about the time. In the Gobi Desert, Park Dae-sung stood before the memory core and made his final request. He did not ask for weapons. He did not ask for shields or engines or anything that could be used to fight. Instead, he asked the ship a simple question. Why did they run? The ship answered. Images flooded the chamber, faster and more intense than before. Dae-sung saw the ancient human empire at its height, stretching across 1,000 worlds. He saw the power they wielded, the technology they commanded. They could have fought the Void Swarm. They could have built weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. They had the knowledge. They had the resources. But they chose not to. The final council had debated for months. Some wanted to fight, to use every terrible weapon they possessed to burn the enemy from the galaxy. Others argued that such weapons would destroy everything they were trying to protect. Victory would mean becoming monsters. In the end, they chose a third path. They chose to save what they could and let the rest go. They chose peace over power, survival over dominance. They scattered their knowledge across the galaxy for others to find, hoping that future species would learn from it and build something better. Then they erased themselves and started over. They were not cowards, Dae-sung whispered. They were brave. It takes more courage to walk away than to fight. The ship pulsed with light, acknowledging his understanding. And then, it showed him one more thing. The transport ship was not alone. Across Earth, buried beneath mountains and oceans and ancient ruins, hundreds of similar ships had been sleeping. They were not weapons. They were beacons, communication devices designed to share a message across the entire galaxy at once. They had been waiting for someone to wake them up, to finish what the ancient council had started. Dae-sung understood what he had to do. He placed both hands on the memory core and thought about everything he had learned. The ancient humans had run because they refused to become destroyers. They had hidden Earth because they wanted their children to grow up in peace, free from the weight of empire. They had scattered their knowledge because they believed other species deserved a chance to build their own futures. They had done all of this because they believed in something more important than power. They believed in hope. The beacons began to wake. On every continent, the ground trembled as ancient machines stirred to life. Lights appeared in places where no lights should be, deep in jungles and beneath frozen ice, and in the hearts of deserts that humans had thought were empty. The buried ships rose from the earth, not flying, but standing like monuments to a forgotten age, and they began to broadcast. The message went out in every language the ancient humans had known, which meant it went out in every language the Directorate understood. It carried images from the memory core, the full history of what humanity had been and why they had chosen to disappear. It showed the Void Swarm and the impossible choice, and the courage it took to start over from nothing. But most importantly, it showed what the ancient humans had wanted for the future. We did not fight because we were weak, the message said. We did not run because we were afraid. We walked away because we knew that power without wisdom destroys everything it touches. We gave you our knowledge freely, hoping you would build a better galaxy than we could. We ask nothing in return except this. Give our children the same chance we gave you. Let them choose their own path. The message ended with a single phrase, repeated in 1,000 languages. We chose peace once. We choose it again. Commander Ves-Oren stared at his displays in shock. The message was playing on every screen, on every ship, across the entire Directorate network. His officers looked at him with uncertain eyes, waiting for orders he could not give. The story the humans told matched the oldest legends of the Federation, tales of kind teachers who had appeared from nowhere and shared their wisdom before vanishing forever. Generations of Directorate children had been raised on those stories. Now they were learning that the teachers had not vanished at all. They had simply hidden until it was safe to return. Commander, his communications officer said, we are receiving messages from other fleets. They want to know. They want to know if we are going to fire on the builders. Ves-Oren did not answer. He was watching the message play again, watching the images of ancient humans choosing sacrifice over destruction. He had spent his entire career believing that strength came from power. that the Directorate survived by being stronger than everyone else. But the humans had been stronger than anyone, and they had walked away from power entirely. What did that say about strength? A single ship broke formation from the blockade. It was a support vessel, small and unarmed, and it positioned itself between the flagship and Earth. Its commander broadcast an open message. "I am Suran, of the Directorate Fleet. I will not fire on the species that gave us everything we have. If you want to quarantine them, you will have to go through me first." Other ships began to break formation. Not many at first, then more, then entire squadrons. They gathered around Suran's vessel, forming a protective barrier between the blockade and Earth. Vesoran watched his fleet dissolve and felt something he had never expected to feel: relief. The Directorate Council convened an emergency session 3 days later. After weeks of debate that would be recorded in history books for centuries to come, they reached a decision. Earth would be granted provisional sovereignty. Humanity would not be integrated into the Federation. Instead, they would be recognized as a founding species, with all the rights and responsibilities that implied. The builders had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Shin Hana stood before the council and accepted their terms with grace. She did not gloat. She did not threaten. She simply thanked them for their wisdom and promised that humanity would work to earn the trust they had been given. Park Dae-sung was not at the ceremony. He was back in the Gobi Desert, standing before the ship that had changed everything. It was quiet now, its message delivered, its purpose fulfilled, but it was still glowing softly, still waiting for whatever came next. Kim Yuna found him there as the 3 suns set, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. "The council wants to speak with you," she said. "They want you to lead the research team that studies the ships. They want you to help us understand what our ancestors left behind." Dae-sung smiled, the first real smile in weeks. "I did not plan any of this, you know. I just wanted to see how it worked. And now you have started a new chapter in human history." Yuna stood beside him, looking at the ship with wonder in her eyes. "How does it feel?" He thought about the ancient council and their impossible choice. He thought about the courage it took to walk away from power, to trust that the future would be better than the past. He thought about 8 billion people who had just learned that they came from the stars. "It feels like we are finally ready," he said. The ship glowed brighter for a moment, as if it agreed. And somewhere in the galaxy, in council chambers and on distant worlds, other species began to tell stories about the day the builders returned. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as teachers who had finally come home.